I just want to first thank you all for your continued support as members of DCPL. We hope that you enjoy this benefit of your membership, and we really appreciate your commitment to our organization and historic preservation. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge some of DCPL's top sponsors whose annual financial support helps underwrite public programs like this one today. They are Denton's, Douglas Development, Antunovich Associates, Atlantic Refinishing and Restoration, Bayer Blinder Bell, EHT Traceries, and KCE Structural Engineers. I also want to point out that Consigli Construction, whose work we will be learning about today, is also a DCPL business member. And so many thanks to you all for your dedication to historic preservation in Washington, D.C. And before the presentation begins, I just want to share a few brief technical notes about how today's program is going to work. So please use the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions of the presenters. I will collect your questions and verbally ask them of our presenters at the conclusion of their presentation. And with that, I am so pleased to introduce you all to today's speakers. Philip Brault has spent his entire 15-year career working for Consigli Construction and as project executive. Phil has led numerous historic preservation projects across multiple states, including the New York State Capitol, Boston Public Library, and Smithsonian National Zoo Police Station. He is also currently leading teams on the restoration of the Netherlands Carillon, Meridian Hill Park, Dumbarton Oaks Main House, and the Menoken Glass House. In 2018, he was awarded Boston Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award and Preservation Mass's Paul and Nikki Songus Award. His passion for historic preservation led him here to Washington, D.C., where he continues to be an activist for Consigli's D.C. office and all things preservation. He and his family reside in Montgomery County, where they enjoy outdoor activities in their leisure time. He earned a BS in civil engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute and an MBA from Northeastern University. He is a lead AP BD+C, Building Design plus Construction, and is a certified construction quality manager with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He is a DC Preservation League trustee and serves on DCPL's Project Review Committee. Naomi Doddington has worked for Consigli Construction for almost 4 years. In addition to managing the restoration of Meridian Hill Park, she is currently involved with the historic restoration of the Netherlands Carillon and National City Christian Church and Menoken Plantation. Her past projects with Consigli include the Smithsonian National Zoo Police Station and architect of the Capitol's Olmsted Terrace, the U.S. Botanical Gardens exterior stone repair and roof replacement, and the Library of Congress Thomas Jefferson Building East and West Main Pavilion roof replacement, and the Thurgood Marshall Federal Judiciary Building facade protection system. A current DC resident, she formerly worked as an architect for the National Park Service's Historic American Building Survey, documenting historic sites, structures, and buildings. Naomi earned an MS in Historic Preservation and Conservation from Clemson University, College of Charleston Graduate School. She also has a BFA in theater production from the University of Florida. She currently serves on the board of the Association for Preservation Technology, Washington, D.C. chapter as treasurer. And with that, I'm excited to turn things over to Phil and Naomi.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
Melissa, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Good afternoon. I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone and welcome you to our presentation today on the construction work at Meridian Hill Park. There we go. As Melissa said, my name is Naomi Doddington, and I am an assistant manager and historic preservationist with Consigli Construction. I work with Consigli on now it's looks like I said it earlier. Sorry, folks. I work with Consigli on projects that relate one way or another to historic buildings, or as in this case, sites. And a lot of what a project manager does is troubleshoot problems. And I find that my background in preservation is invaluable in that I'm able to come to these problems with the sensitivity of the significance of these venues and my knowledge of historic construction materials and techniques. And of course, I don't do this alone. And many of the historic projects I've worked on during my time at Consigli, I've relied on the mentorship and assistance of project executive Phil Brault.
Thanks, Naomi, and thank you all for joining today. And Melissa, thank you for those intros. Definitely don't need to give you any more information after that. We're excited to present today just on some of the work that's happening in the park. So we can jump ahead. And I'd like to just give a quick overview of Consigli for those that don't know us. It's a fourth generation family-led company, 100% employee stock-owned company, specialization in historic preservation. So Naomi, myself, along with many others, including the 350 plus craftsmen and women that we have within the company. This is what we love to do. This is what gets us excited at the end of the day. 9 offices up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and our DC office here, a block up from Metro Center, was started after we completed the renovation of the Renwick Gallery for the Smithsonian. So our office here in DC is about seven years old. We're up to 65 folks in our DC office, and continuing to grow. I just want to highlight the project team. We've got a great team on this project. A lot of legwork and work had been done prior to us coming on board. Obviously, National Park Service, Denver Service Center has been involved with this project throughout. This is the 5th and 6th phase of the project itself, which is focused mainly on the Lower Plaza. APSI is the CMR working for National Park Service on the project, and the design team. So Mills and Snoring Architects, Wish Janey, Langing, Loring, all involved with the generation of the construction documents that were used to bid this project, and are obviously still involved now through the execution. And then on the construction side, this wouldn't get done without our consultants and our key subcontractors. SMI Services is doing all of our utility work. Atlantic Refinishing and Restoration has the joy of the task of replicating all of the early exposed aggregate concrete in the park. And CTL Group, who has been involved in other phases. They're our historic concrete consultant. A lot of the information that Naomi is going to share with you today is from a lot of the reports and sampling and testing that they've already completed to date in the park. And then just to acknowledge, again, we talked about this, right? The park was constructed over the course of 25 years. We know throughout the park, the early studio experimented with various mixed designs, various aggregates. So everywhere throughout the park is a unique instance of fine art. So definitely want to thank DC Preservation League, Melissa Loreno, for putting this together today and timing it well with the tour that was given by Fiona Clem a couple weeks ago. So great job with the scheduling of all this, and certainly all the work that's been done in the past. Maybe from some folks that are on this call today, the architrave report that was generated was used to develop the CDs for this project. But again, this is just to highlight that this isn't recreating the wheel, right? This is a lot of work that's gone in over the last 85 years of trying to understand the techniques and the sources of aggregate and the materials and the construction of the work in the park, and how we can then come in and replicate it to the highest level of quality, highest level of durability possible. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Naomi, and she's going to talk all about the work to date and the work ahead.
Thanks, Phil. Meridian Hill Park is an incredibly active site. Every day, people come to walk their dogs, play with their kids, yoga, skateboard, play in the famous drum circle, and the park is just constantly in use. When we started the project at the end of last year, we saw signs of this heavy use everywhere. There are areas of spalled or broken concrete, uneven sidewalks, broken lights, and the grime that's endemic to an urban park. Then there are the things that the public doesn't see. The tree held together by mechanical means and the mechanical rooms with leaking ceilings. The purpose of this rehabilitation project is to restore the functionality of the lower plaza and make it accessible to everyone. Currently, our main focus is on the south portion of the lower plaza. We are doing this by selectively demolishing some elements, installing a brand new stormwater management system, installing a modular soil cell system to mitigate damage from tree roots in the future, and recreating J.J. Earley's pioneering use of exposed aggregate concrete and installing some new lighting. We're also going to be replicating a historic drinking fountain, installing pleaching frames, which will be used to train the trees in the alley, and planting trees, shrubs, and other plants. Let's start with what we've done so far. The first, and perhaps most dramatic change, has been the demolition of the trees. It's important to note a few things. Trees do not live forever. The ones on site when we started were actually planted in the 1980s. They were younger than I am. One of them was held together by a series of bolts. The roots of the others had grown under the concrete, heaving it up and making it unsafe to walk on. Now, the original design for this park called for American chestnut trees to be planted in the lower plaza. You may or may not know that by the time this project was completed, the American chestnut tree had been attacked by a blight from overseas, which has made it functionally extinct. Now, there are scientists working to crossbreed the seeds from the American chestnut with the Chinese chestnut, which has the highest blight resistance of any chestnut tree, and others who are playing around with the genes of the DNA of the American chestnuts in order to make it possible to grow them again. However, all of that technology is far off in the future, if it even ever comes to fruition. The new trees that will be planted are a specimen called Columbia plane tree, and they're a good surrogate for the American chestnut. They're resistant to blight. They are a wonderful shade tree with good fall color and are beautifully formed for winter visual interest. They're also very well suited for growing in an urban environment, such as the middle of Meridian Hill Park. We will talk about other measures we will be taking to prevent the trees from causing the same problems our 1980s specimens did a little later in the presentation. Next up, the 11 different types of exposed aggregate concrete. We're not taking it all out. We are carefully excising certain pieces, like a surgeon with a scalpel. The concrete that is coming out is limited to areas where we need to install the new stormwater management system and areas that are already damaged. Now, normally we come into a project like this and are told what kind of concrete the client wants us to use. The architects tell us what they want in terms of color, the mix of cement to aggregate, and the compression strength needed, things like that. On this project, no one knows for sure what the existing concrete mixes were. J.J. Earley spent the entire 20 years that the park was under construction experimenting with the mixed designs, exploring the possibilities of this medium. I don't want to get into a lot of background, but if you missed the presentation earlier this month on the history of Meridian Hill Park, it's important to know who John Joseph Earley was. He was not the designer of the park. That honor goes to Horace W. Peaslee, with early contributions by George Burnap. J.J. Earley was the son of a local sculptor and stone carver. When his father passed away, Earley and his partner, Basil Taylor, took over the business and began moving its focus into exposed aggregate concrete, and thus was a local business here in DC. He worked with the Commission of Fine Arts to develop the exposed aggregate used in Meridian Hill Park. As most of you probably know, the plan for the Meridian Hill Park was to fulfill the vision of the 1902 Macmillan Plan for the city of DC, in which a grand European-style park would anchor this neighborhood. This plan was championed by Mary Foote Henderson, the socialite wife of a former Missouri senator, who envisioned Meridian Hill as the beaux arts centerpiece of a beautified capital city with a new White House and European-style chateaus along with busts of the US presidents running up along 16th Street, if you can imagine that. The purpose of using exposed aggregate concrete in the park was to mimic the look of Italian mosaics, which fit perfectly with this vision of the Meridian Hill area. The park is composed primarily of neutral toned installations, beige, black, and tan. However, at the top of the stairs on the 16th Street side of the park, we see some polychrome medallions, some of Early's earliest experiments in the polychrome style for which he would become famous. As you can see, the example there is from another building much later in his career. One crisp day in January, we set out to the job site with a core drill and made a series of locations to sample. These cores, cylinders of concrete, are used to show how the mix was made. In standard concrete, the cement and aggregate are mixed such as the aggregate is distributed evenly through the mix. The mix is troweled towards the end of the process to bring up the cement paste and make the surface smooth. With exposed aggregate concrete, the last step is actually to wash away the paste, exposing the aggregate. That's a bit simplified, but that's the essence of the process. From the samples collected in January, our concrete subcontractor could do some cursory examinations. The color of the mortar and the aggregates can be seen fairly well with the naked eye. For a scientific breakdown of the concrete, we turn to our concrete consultant, Mike Durup, and his associates at CTL Group. They performed petrographic analysis of the samples. This allowed them to study them with a great degree of exactitude. I'm talking about zooming in to the thickness, the equivalent of a human hair. And what did this analysis tell us? We now know that what looks like black aggregate and was identified upon visual inspection in a report from Architrave Architects as crushed ebony limestone or bluestone is actually a very, very dark green schist. Sourcing aggregates for this project was an immediate challenge. It's assumed that the early studio used local aggregates in the 19-teens to 1930s construction period. Those quarries are either closed or no longer producing the same aggregates as the stone changes throughout the quarry. Even the sources recommended in the report that's just over a decade old are unavailable. Our team has looked high and low and has been able to locate aggregates to match all of our historic stones. The scientific studies identified the ratio of cement to sand. We know that, unlike what was previously assumed, they used gray Portland cement in the mix and not white. We're also able to identify the differences between this historic cement and what's available to us today. For example, the historic cement is much more coarsely ground than what we're able to get in our modern age. Of course, our ability to grind cement more finely, which is generally an advancement in the technology, comes with advantages and disadvantages. It's important to know about the disadvantage, such as the need to add air to the mix so that we can account for them as we pull together the formulas for the new concrete. While the laboratory was doing its work, our concrete subcontractor was playing J.J. Early in his own studio. Bob Goldstein of Atlantic Refinishing and Restoration has spent several months tinkering with the mixes. He's been adjusting the color of the mortar, the color of the aggregates, and the other elements of the mix design in order to create something that is an aesthetic match to the original concrete on site. Combined with work from the lab, this marriage of art and science is meant to provide a product that not only looks accurate to the historic elements, but will also have the same kind of durability we have seen from the original concrete. And what you see here are on the right there, a mock-up panel, sample panel, and it's sitting on top of a historic paver panel, so you can see we're getting there. And then on the left, you see more samples, and then our sub-slab that was poured the other day, and we're getting ready to pour our first on-site mock-up. We're all really excited about that. The last bit of demolition is also the first bit of new construction. We are excavating below ground and installing pipes and new drains. There was at one time a stormwater management system in place. We've come across the terracotta pipes from that system. Terracotta has been used for plumbing for several centuries now. Unfortunately, being somewhat permeable, trees tend to find any small fissure and send their roots into it to get at the water inside the pipe. The roots eventually either fill the pipe entirely or cause it to collapse. Time and tree roots have rendered them useless. In this case, we're only finding sherds of the old pipes, so the trees have destroyed them. The new system we're installing will be effective for much longer. This is also where our new trees come in. The new systems we're installing are, as part of our site work, we're installing modular soil cell units. These units are fitted together and work with the stormwater pipes as a whole system. The system serves a dual purpose in that it will allow water that is not diverted directly into the stormwater pipes to percolate through the soil and ultimately make its way into the stormwater system. Additionally, the trees that will be planted in the midst of this array of cells can send their roots down into the void spaces of the cells. This will help to limit their upward growth, which is so disruptive of the pavement. This will serve to preserve the concrete for what we hope will be another 100 years. Another major component of this project will be the creation of an accessible entrance into the lower plaza from the 16th Street sidewalk. This is part of the balancing act of preservation. We want to bring the plaza back to its original condition, but we do not want the attitudes of the past towards those with mobility limitations to dictate their access to the lower plaza forever. To that end, we will be removing a span of wall from pier to pier on the 16th Street side of the park. We will be installing a ramp from the present sidewalk to the plaza itself, and then a second ramp will allow access all the way to the Buchanan Monument. Our work on the monument itself is limited to installing new joint sealants. Full restoration will await a future phase of work. For the finishing touches to the lower plaza, we're going to be installing new light fixtures in the perimeter of the pool. The original fixtures are long gone and nothing remains of them but the back boxes which were embedded into the concrete when the pool was poured. Our new fixtures will match the look of the historic fixtures with the added benefit of being LED lights. We're also going to be adding some bollard light fixtures at the entrance of the park from the accessible ramp and some signage indicating the location of the ramp. There will also be new drain grates at all drain locations. If you've been to the park recently, the current grates look like a sieve with little holes all over them. Those are not the historic grates. The historic grates had slots in them, and we're going to be having those recreated. The new grates will return to that design, and we'll be planting more trees as well as an assortment of perennials and annuals. Finally, all the concrete of the lower plaza will get a gentle wash. In addition to our work at the lower plaza, we have a few smaller elements that we will be working on elsewhere on the site. At the Grand Terrace stairs, we'll be fixing some areas of spalled concrete and we'll apply a water repellent sealant to the stairs to help stop the water leaks in the mechanical rooms below. We will also be reproducing the original drinking fountain that's outside of the restrooms. This is at the upper park. Finally, and this is not so small, we'll be installing pleaching frames, which you or I might call a trellis. And this is going to be up at the upper park in an area called the Linden Alley. This is a design element that was never able before to be realized, but it's going to be finished and frame the view of the Washington Monument from the park. I want to thank you all so much for your time. And at this time, we'd like to open the floor to questions.
Sorry, I'm getting back on. Well, thank you so much, Naomi and Phil. You guys are doing an insane amount of work at the park. I didn't know just how intricate it was, but it is very wonderful work that you're doing. But yeah, so let's see if we have any questions from the audience. And I guess as people are thinking, maybe I'll ask the first question. I guess what is one of the, and you might have kind of talked about this already, but what are the most challenging aspects of this project? Or like, what were some times where you kind of had to, you went in with a plan, but then like kind of once you got there, you said, okay, well, now we need to kind of shift a little bit, and kind of how did that process go, I guess?
It kind of ties in with the question we just got there too, Naomi. So what was the biggest challenge so far to date? Clearly this initial mock-up that Naomi had shared is really the starter for all of the other mock-ups that we have to do throughout the park, because it's gonna provide a lot of the answers between the concrete mix and the coloring that goes hand in hand with some of the other elements, especially the polychromatic design elements that EARLEY has in the lower plaza. So this is a big milestone, is getting through the first mock-up, which is the majority of the horizontal exposed aggregate in that lower plaza around the pool, and that will actually allow for the full production run of a lot of that work to go into place come June and July. The challenges from there are then going to be the polychromatic designs, which is another layer of artwork and artistry that goes into producing that, and then the pier and the wall for the new accessible entrance. There's a several step process that goes into reconstructing those architectural piers. So really putting together those samples, which again, we're working on samples now. We'll be doing a mini mock-up and then a full mock-up. And just to be able to get it just right is surely the next challenge ahead. Another question here: will all 6 fountains in the reflecting pool be in working condition after renovation?
That's not in our current scope of work. We'll clean it, but that's the actual fountains are not in our scope of work. I don't know if they're currently working or not. I presume some of the leaks in the mechanical pump rooms at the Great Terrace stairs might impact the functionality of those. But we know that there's more phases of work coming, including some serious work for Buchanan.
Yep. Talk about the cascade and sort of the upper level. And again, I think it's similar to Naomi's answer there, is sort of our work on the cascade, and the upper level is limited to the Great Plaza and the stairs, some small repairs on the Great Wall. So minimal, majority of the work is there in that lower plaza.
Yeah, and then we have a question from Fiona, who gave her last presentation. She asked, what kind of annuals and perennials will be planted, and will lotus flowers be planted in the reflecting pool?
From our scope, there is no plan to install any lotus plants in the reflecting pool. Whether or not the Park Service has plans to do that after we've completed this work, we don't know. We're looking at planting things like dogwoods and the plane trees that we mentioned before. And we're a little ways away from the landscaping aspect of things, so I'm not 100% sure of everything that's going in there, but it's a lot. It's an extensive planting plan, and it's going to be really, really beautiful.
I think we have another question. Do original records from EARLEY's office survive? And I guess, did you guys reference those at all?
That's something that would be more in the realm of the architects when they were developing the scope of work, and in the architrave report that was done about 15 years ago. I have looked to see what's available. The earliest sources that I'm finding are little snatches here and there in old newspaper articles and things like that. And then we have the Historic American Buildings Survey drawings that you saw earlier in the presentation. Those date to about the 1980s as well. As far as materials from the early collection, I haven't been able to track anything down from what's available online. Obviously, with COVID, we haven't really been able to access all of the resources we normally would. So we've been working with what we can find on the Googles.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, I think we have a couple other questions. Let's see.
Charlie's asking, so right now the work is scheduled to go through this upcoming winter. There'll be a winter shutdown And then we're gonna come back in the spring to finish up the remaining work. So the spring of 2022.
Great. Yeah, and Jerry asks, could you discuss the new access ramp a bit more and how it will be accessed from 16th Street, a cut in the wall or something else?
Right. So there's an area on 16th Street where there is, well, behind the wall in the park area of the 16th Street it's kind of like a hill reaching up to that exposed aggregate site wall that everyone's familiar with. It runs the entire length of 16th Street. The height there of the wall is about 15 feet, and the soil comes up to about 2 to 3 feet from the top. So we're going to be excavating that soil out and kind of reducing the grade in that area in general. We don't want to have just a massive cut through the soil there. We're going to be installing some stormwater management system, drains and manholes and pipes to get the water out of that area. We'll also be installing the bollards for light fixtures. And then we're going to be taking literally a cut of the wall out in this one area. It's going to be right next to an existing pier, and it's going to be more than wide enough to meet ADA. It's a little bit, it's a generous size ramp basically. And then on the other side of the ramp, we will be creating a new pier that matches the historic pier. So there's going to be a lot of pressure there to make sure that looks great, because it's going to be six or 8 feet away from a historic pier. The ramp is going to have a smooth textured concrete on the walking / rolling surface, and it's going to have bollards right next to it along the short site wall that will provide lighting in the evenings. The park has light. This is just going to bring some lighting to that one area. Right where the current 16th Street stairs are there near W Street, there's going to be a sign in one of the planters that flanks that staircase, and it's going to basically say, you know, the ramp's that way. You're only going about 10 or 15 feet from that staircase to get to the ramp, and there'll be signs at the ramp itself indicating that that's what it's for. When you come through the first section of the ramp, it will allow you to access the part of the plaza where the polychrome concrete elements are. So you'll be able to see all of that. Then you can go back to the ramp and keep going up the ramp, and that will allow you to access the pool level of the plaza there, which is the largest part of the plaza and where we see so many things happening. I've seen so many weddings there. It's really great. So they'll be able to access that entire area there with the reflecting pool in it. We know that the park is separate from our project, having an artist reproduce the amylary sphere that once sat in front of the pool. So they're going to have a reconstruction put in place there, and that's going to be really cool because I've seen historic photographs of it in place, and it's going to be really, really amazing to have that back. We do know that at the top of the park, the actual fence around it has those little amylary spheres as like a decorative element. So it's nice to actually have the actual one back in place. And then from that area around the pool, they'll be able to go back to another area section of ramp, and that will get them up to where the Buchanan Monument is. So it's really going to provide access to all of the hardscaped areas of the lower plaza. It's an access that we just haven't ever had before for people who are using walkers or wheelchairs, or even someone with a stroller. So it's really going to be great because, as I said at the start of our presentation, the park is very heavily used, and it's great to be able to provide that to other people.
Yeah, and that's really wonderful. Especially, as we're talking about access, and especially, everybody should have this access to these historic sites like this, right? So it's good to hear about what you all are doing. And I guess that kind of leads into a question I have as we wait for other audience members to get their questions in. I think maybe for some folks, our members, I think, might know more, but I guess just for those who might not, some of this, to get to this point, there's kind of a lot of compromise, right? Or planning as we're dealing with historic sites. You know, there's like mitigation kind of tactics and things like that. And I guess, Phil, you know, you're a trustee, but then also an active member of the project review committee. So I guess, you know, what did it take to get to this point, or what is something that folks should know about, you know, wanting to restore and rehabilitate the historic, but also making it accessible to the modern day community, but then also keeping it accessible for future generations, I guess.
Yeah, I think the challenge. So the challenge, and Naomi touched upon it a little bit earlier, is how do you put all of this documentation and information that's been completed to date and put it into a set of biddable documents, right? So that it can be bid through National Park Service and per the FAR and so on, and to be able to get a contractor on board that can then digest all that information, as gray as it may be, right, in the specifications of then being able to replicate the work. So that's the biggest challenge of how do you get it to a biddable set of documents, but still maintain the level of control and the layers of sampling and submittals and mock-ups to ensure that the end goal and the end of this is that we are replicating to the highest level of quality and the highest match throughout the park. You know, 11 different examples of concrete that we have to match. And one of those examples, the horizontal concrete, may be different 10 yards away, right? So that's what you're up against. And, you know, I think the design team did an excellent job of ensuring that the documents were to the level of scrutiny and assurance that when they did bid this out and brought a contractor in, that they would get that end product. And that's the ultimate goal, and is that when we turn this over next spring, nobody's going to know new from old, right? And that's what we're trying to do. We don't want the new to stand out, and we want this to look like it's still Early's project from years prior, and that we've matched the historic intent and haven't damaged any historic fabric along the way.
I'd like to speak to that as well. I think if anybody has a historic property that they're responsible for, that the Park Service in this case is a very good example of a good steward. They started with an investigation. They brought on Architrave. They did an extensive report. It's a 500-page report on the different areas of the park, the development phases. You know, we said that this was constructed between the 19-teens and the 1930s. And it literally was, and they went back into different areas and worked in different, and they were able to identify all of those different building campaigns. And that level of detail of assessing what's there to start with is just really, really important. And then the design team that took that work from there and made it into a set of construction documents for us to work from, they've then synthesized that in order to be able to provide us with those drawings and those specifications that we can build from. And I do like the way that they've incorporated modern technologies such as the Silva-cell system that will help to then account for things that we know happened to the historic concrete. So hopefully we won't have areas of the sidewalk that are 6 inches different one from the other because the tree root has pushed up in that area. So it's a great pairing. You know, preservation is not stayed and static. It's an ever-changing field. Mm-hmm. And I find it exciting when we do take these, you know, new technologies and we're able to apply them to our historic properties. And I think insofar as providing access goes, so there's a big, you know, theory within preservation that you don't do anything to a site or a building that you can't undo. Well, we all know that there's limits to that, of course. And I think that in the location where this ramp is going to be placed and in the way that it's going to be designed and installed, it really does reach that balance where, yes, it's something, I mean, we could put the wall back at some point if we wanted to, but it's something that is very, very sensitive to the park and is very unobtrusive to what's actually there.
think there's one other question about when did our company first get involved in historic preservation work? And our company was actually founded in 1905 by it was actually a family of stonemasons. So it goes all the way back to 1905. And again, sort of the pride in a lot of the historic preservation projects we've been involved with, and the projects, those particular projects that we've actually self-performed with our own masonry self-performed crews.
That's incredible. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other questions? That's not yet. We'll just see. We'll give it a moment, see if anybody has other questions. But I guess, you know, in addition to your website, which I have put in the chat, I believe that you are also on social media, and folks can kind of follow you there. Is there any other way that they can kind of stay updated and in the loop on your work and how it's progressing with this project and others?
Hashtag Consigli Construction.
There you go.
It's, we have I mean, like everyone else, Instagram, LinkedIn, you know, there's a lot of, you know, marketing and certainly if you're interested in getting more of the type of marketing distribution and handouts and flyers of what we're working on and what we're doing, we're happy to send those as mailers as well. So I think, do they have our email address, our personal email address, Melissa?
I don't think so.
I can type it. Yeah. I can type it in the chat now. So if anybody wants to reach out, we're happy to send more information.
That'd be great. Thanks, Phil.
We're also very involved in the community. So if there's an occasion for some volunteer service, we definitely participate in that. Like we said earlier at the intro, I volunteer on the board of APTDC. Phil is on the board for DCPL. So we really like to be in the community as much as possible. We have a project in the Anacostia neighborhood where we're really getting the neighbors involved and doing recruiting, active recruiting for new employees down there. And we really want to be a community member more than just a construction company. And I think that comes from the fact that we're a family business. You know, this business has been in the family for generations now. And it really, you know, a lot of people talk about that it's very cliche, but it really is the way that we look at each other, and it is the way that we want to treat everyone around us.
No, definitely. I definitely believe that it does make that difference. And especially in historic preservation, which is so community based and focused, right? So no, it is wonderful. Yeah, we do have another question from John, and we kind of talked about like the landscaping timeline not being totally set yet, but he just wants to know how many trees will you be obtaining and what variety?
There's going to be dozens of trees. So we're planting some up at the Linden LA, and despite the name, those are not linden trees. We are, like I said, we're planting the Columbia plane tree. We're doing some dogwoods. We're doing some, oh my goodness. I was not expecting questions about the landscaping. I'm going to be very honest.
That's okay. That's okay.
We're definitely a lot of local native kind of plants as much as possible as well. So it's really going to be a very sustainable kind of landscape environment. There's no irrigation system at the Lower Plaza, and there's no plan to install one. So all of these have to be plants that are actually going to survive our DC 1,000,000-degree, 100,000% humidity summers. And so that's really the choices that were made for the Lower Plaza.
Yeah, and there was several contract options at bid time for landscaping, and Park Service did end up accepting them all. So it is an extensive landscaping package that's going back in.
Great. Yeah, people are really taking to our parks and gardens theme this month. But yes, so okay, I don't see any other questions. Was there anything else about this project maybe we didn't ask about, or something else that you'd like to talk about? in terms of this project? Anything at all? No? All right.
I'd like to just briefly on the COVID situation. So I know that this time span for a lot of people has been about sitting at home and twiddling their thumbs. And those of us who work in construction have not had that experience. And so our workers have been on site this entire time. Our superintendents, our subcontractors, everyone's been working hard. And I really want to give kudos and a shout out to them. We've worked really, really safe. We haven't had any major issues with COVID on any of our job sites. Consigli was an industry leader with putting up protocols and systems, and just every time the CDC came out with guidelines, we updated ours, and we really did have very successful projects that had good, safe working conditions for everybody. And the team here at this project in particular, it's outdoors, which we all know is a little bit better, but these folks, they come to work every day, and we know what that means as far as what they put themselves possibly in line for. So we really appreciate that these folks did that, and that we were able to put measures into place to keep them all safe.
Yeah, no, that is really wonderful. And yeah, we definitely give them recognition, and we thank them for their hard work, especially during this very crucial time, very dangerous time. So yeah.
Or we can all tell when we're 90 years old in our rocking chairs.
Right.
So just back to the question on the species. There's several variations of dogwoods, boxwoods, hollies, red cedars, cherry laurels, cherries, American linden, and spirea.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Thanks, Phil.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been really wonderful. Thank you both so much again for taking the time to teach us more about this project. It is, like I said, very, very intense and interesting, and I know we're all going to be very excited to continue to watch, your progress on this, and we're all looking forward to seeing what the end result is. And good luck as you continue this project. And so, yeah, so thank you again. And
we invite everyone to come.
Yeah.
If you stand on top of the Great Terrace Stairs, you can see the work that's going on. So over the summer, June, July, a lot of fun. You're going to see the exposed aggregate concrete going in.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a chance that, maybe we don't get with like the indoor spaces, but yeah, this is definitely a benefit of the outdoor ones. You can kind of go and sit and watch. So yeah, definitely. So again, thank you so much again, everybody. The website for Consigli, both the general website and then also the DC office website, they're both in the chat, and Phil put in their email addresses. So yeah, so you can kind of ask them any other questions maybe that you think of following the presentation. And then yes, I thank you all again, not only for your membership, but for joining us today. And just, before we close out, I just want to say that we hope that you will join us tomorrow for a program with the 1882 Foundation and AAPI in DC here in plain sight. We're going to be having a virtual happy hour with them at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and tomorrow's program is going to look at local stories, histories, and memories of what this month means to Asian American Washingtonians, and it's relatively young history. So this event is free and open to the public, and the program is part of the work that the 1882 Foundation is doing for the Asian American Historic Context Study, which DCPL is helping to oversee. So yeah, you can visit their website and register today. And again, thank you so much, Naomi and Phil, for sharing your expertise with us and giving us an inside look on this project. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us.